Okay. Hi everyone, this is Ricky Spencer, and welcome to another of our Sociology of Media Voices series. And today we have someone who has influenced some of my research while I was at doing my first master's at Melbourne University in education. And Steven Kolber, I hope I pronounced his name correct, or he might correct me in a minute, will tell you his bit of background, because for me, it's an honor to have him here. And I just want to hear his voice. And I think it will come really nicely if we hear a little bit about Steven. Welcome, Steven. And tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you, Steven Kolber?
Oh, it sounds easy. So I'm Steven Kolber. Everyone always puts a little bit of extra on the last name, but it's just straightforward Aussie Kolber. So I'm a teacher by trade. So I'm just in my 11th year of teaching now. And the things I like to do are basically I try and bring teachers to research and research to teachers and vice versa. So that involves everything but a PhD hanging behind me on the wall. And I sort of got to a certain point where it was sort of PhD or not. And I decided that I could kind of do without that. So I'm currently working on a book for Springer called Empowering Teachers and Democratizing Schooling, which is the things that I'm all about, raising the voice of teachers, trying to be an advocate and an activist for those causes. Because I feel like basically if we get schooling right, then a lot of other things become possible. And in my own experience as a teacher, the paucity of time that we have available means that there's not really that much left to do the excellent job that we would like to be doing. Obviously, we all do an excellent job as it is, but I think we could be doing a lot better with a lot more time. So basically, with that in mind, I run an edu reading group called #EduReading, where we read an academic article a month. We discuss the big topics going on in education. So that's always good fun. And I run teach meets where we get teachers together to share their voices. And the goal is always to read research so that teachers can have the confidence to speak for themselves. Because I think too often teachers are quiet, rule-following, little obedient soldiers. And obviously it being a largely feminized profession, at least from the outside looking in, it means that we're the constant whipping boy in the media. So just Monday this week, The Age published an article of mine called Teachers Need More Good News or something, that was about some research into the fact that a lot of teachers avoid the news, or they find it demoralizing. And so that's the kind of thing that I feel like we're working against, or I personally try to work against, to empower teachers to be confident. So that's my rambling introduction.
Oh, thank you for that, Stephen. You're very modest in your accomplishments. I want to first start by taking us a little bit through your background. What inspired you to choose teaching as a profession, or did teaching choose you?
I think teaching chose me. I enjoyed university. I enjoyed school. I enjoyed the learning part of it. And then being from a middle class background, a cousin before me went and did an arts degree, and then at the end was choosing between working in the government or not working at all. And I thought, I'd like to have a couple more options than those. So I did a double degree, and after about 4 years, we started with about 500 teachers to be, and by the end there was about 20 of us. And I sort of, you do the head check and you go, oh, I think I might be one of those teacher people. So I went straight from university to teaching, did my hard yards as, a 20-year-old teaching, 17, 18-year-olds. And so that was a bit of a challenge at the start. And more and more, I've just sort of started to realize just how good a job it is if you like learning and you like sharing your passions with others. Then teaching is probably the best profession, but also not without its problems, of course.
And that's wonderful to hear about your passion, because I think a lot of the times as teachers, we get a lot of misconceptions. And one of the areas that I find, and I'd like you to sort of your comments on this, is that everyone seems to be an expert on teaching and teachers, and that there is this underlying current, sometimes I've heard, that, oh, this is easy. Anyone, I was at school for, 12 years. How hard is it to be a teacher? And I wondered now with COVID and the experience of distance learning and parents, actually, perhaps, do you feel that this experience of COVID is showing parents just the complexity of what teaching actually entails?
I don't know. I'd like to think so. Depends on what kind of day you catch me on, whether I think things have changed and they're never going back, and or whether they're going to stay the same as they always have. Schooling's been pretty resistant to change across the years, and I think that's partly a good thing, partly a bad thing. We've just done parent teacher quite recently, and a number of parents sort of said, "Oh, we saw the way you worked with our students remotely because they can be behind the screen, so to speak." And they were positive. They said, "Oh, you were very engaging," or "the classes were interesting," those sort of things. But yeah, you've got an amazing point there. It's sort of everyone has 12 to 13 years of experience in schools, so they feel like they know what's going on. But which is something you don't have for a doctor, for a chiropractor, for anything like that. Like if you asked any person on the street, what does a doctor do, day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, those sort of, well, I guess they consult and then dot dot dot. But for teachers, everyone has an experience, and for many people, we need to recognize their schooling experience wasn't good. Maybe they were bullied, maybe they had interactions with teachers they didn't enjoy. There's a whole bunch of royal commissions into all sorts of things that say bad things happen in schools, and those things can't be taken for granted. So it's kind of it's something we have to be wary of and aware of, that everyone has a history of school, and for many it's not a positive experience. So being called into the principal office probably isn't a value neutral proposition if the last time you were in a principal's office you were being expelled, or all those sort of things that could happen. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but yeah, there's definitely a confidence that everyone knows what teaching is and how it works, and unfortunately that doesn't help us too often, I would say.
And Stephen, your passion, or one of your areas, is with learning with technology, and I just want to get your thoughts on, with COVID and the whole changing landscape where teaching was put onto Zoom, the platform, or one of the other counterparts to it. Do you think that now having Zoom or digital learning sort of thrusted upon the whole teaching population and students, do you think that's going to change the way we think about technology and learning?
Yeah, I don't think so. So kind of, I would count myself among pre-COVID, a relatively small group of people that, went to all the technology conferences, and we're talking about AR, VR, flipped learning, instructional videos, my big area. And there was definitely a lot more optimism back then that, this could be something, it could be a thing. Maybe if we got all the dinosaur teachers to just go online and learn how to make a video and all those sort of things, that things would change. Pardon me. But it's rather hard to maintain that belief in the face of, and admittedly, like, it's not perfect conditions for going online, but it's not been ideal. I don't know. What's your experience been?
Well, I just wanted to add, it's interesting because as a trained teacher, going into a university setting, when I was finishing my master's and now also doing another master's as well as a doctorate, which I'm struggling with at the moment, the number of teachers, I think, struggle with the medium of teaching in a digital space and knowing how to engage with students. And it's sort of like disappointing, because in my head, I'm trying to capture the ideas, but I'm also thinking, oh, if I was teaching, I would do this. And I would try and make questions more engaging, and using, how having the whiteboard, electronic whiteboards, and Pebble, there are all these wonderful, all these wonderful interactive features that one can do to really capture learning and make it so that there's all full engagement. And that's one of the challenges I'm finding, that and I also hope, and I'm wondering, I've had some pre-service teachers tell me that they're kind of struggling because the people delivering some of the lectures are struggling themselves
Mm,
because, as you stated, I think, and I'm probably a dinosaur in some ways, because 20, 30 years ago, one felt that you specialized in a particular area of teaching and you taught a certain way. And it was always, you had your experts in the school who were your tech support and your digital, your IT teachers. And they were like, oh, I don't know, I'll just go to the ask the IT teacher. And gradually it sort of swept through all curriculum areas that one had to use the internet and intranet, and but still there was this thing, oh well, if I don't do it well, it's okay because the kids know better than me, so why should I learn, or I'll never catch up. And having those negative thoughts has kind of, and for some people it is scary
mm,
because you think, oh my god, I'm not comfortable with it. What if I make a mistake? How do I control that environment that I'm not familiar with? So
mm,
for me, I think there's so much growth and potential, but I feel as though for my experiences in the higher education setting, I do believe there's a real need for more training, intensive training on how to make an interactive experience for your audience. And to me, that's, and that's the fundamental thing of teaching. That's why I love teaching, because I've always said at university, it's interesting how you can teach at university and not have a teaching degree.
mm,
And I seem to think, and that shows, because one can have content knowledge, but when you're trying to deliver it and develop deeper learning in an
mm.
interactive way, it does show if you don't have that engagement. So, and this is one thing I probably throw out to the audience who's listening, the way, and I'm an advocate, is that, unless you do the teacher training and you go through that experience, or as I call the apprenticeship of years in a classroom where you're continuously working with 30 people in a room and trying to capture learning and trying to coordinate progress, it's that when you start to realize, and it might be through fear, it might be through time management, you learn how to deliver and produce something that's going to be engaging for all your members. And I feel sometimes in a digital space, we can lose some students because they can switch off, they
Mm.
cannot participate in a Zoom. So sorry to be long-winded,
No, no.
Stephen, but I'm just wondering, it's that for someone like yourself who's a practitioner in the field, do you think we need to really, I guess, consider a different style of training for teachers now that we're in this space of digital learning?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like as you were speaking, I was thinking, I was having, Vietnam style flashbacks to about 3 weeks ago. I was teaching some pre-service teachers myself
Oh,
on Zoom, but I didn't have the settings set up how you would like it. So I could share screen, but I couldn't get them to annotate. I couldn't do breakout rooms. I couldn't do
mm-hmm.
polls. I couldn't do all the things that make an activity, a session interactive. And it felt like sort of having my hands tied behind my back in a face-to-face class, because there were so many things I wanted to be doing and that I wanted the students to be doing that I couldn't do. And obviously, as you say, that's kind of, you want to model what practice what you preach, so to
Mm.
speak. So in terms of, and I can't speak to initial teacher education too much, but if I think of my own experience, it was theoretically very strong, and I'm probably one of the few people who was kind of there was a piece in the conversation not that long ago that said only 80% of uni students don't do the readings for their course. And I sort of thought, wow, okay, I was definitely one of the 20% who was like, this is all great stuff, and trying to use it in a reflexive way and trying to
Mm.
see how it fit with my practice. But yeah, there's definitely something to it, especially because if we expect our new teachers, our baby teachers, to go into schools and they might be remote, they might be teaching via Zoom, Microsoft, Google, whatever it is. It's, yeah, the current model probably isn't achieving that aim. It's definitely giving them a good background theoretically and kind of getting them to do a lot of reflection and those sort of things. But yeah, to me, I would want, and tomorrow night I'll be trying this out for the first time with some pre-service teachers,
Mm.
getting them to produce some instructional videos so they can say to a future employer or school or whatever, here's me teaching via video, just so you know I have that skill set. And those sort of things, being able to, and Monday night was building interaction into a short mini teaching sequence. So using all the digital tools that we're talking about and some not so digital tools. Like I've got, pages over here with yes and no written on them for a quiz that asks the students to sort of, show what was going on, to give a yes or no answer, to give a score, kind of getting, as much as possible, getting the students actively engaged. Because as you say, it's quite possible to be off topic, off screen, off map, whatever it is, but to be a glowing logo on the screen and still do that. So yeah, there's definitely lots of work to be done in initial teacher education, but that's true for teaching as well. But I mean, it's pretty incredible what Victorian teachers have done, kind of bouncing from, for many never having used any of these platforms at all to, we've just rounded out, I think today might be 145 or 146 days of remote learning, and to keep the vast majority of kids bubbling along in that kind of a system is pretty impressive. Keeping in mind, like, we were never trained for this. We didn't sign up for it. It wasn't, when I grew up, I want to be a teacher, and we pictured ourselves, talking into a little screen in the corner of our room. It's not quite as thrilling as the face-to-face stuff, but
And I think we appreciate too the importance of delivering your message. The information that you impart. I'm more conscious of any groups that I do, that my preparation is such that I try and select words, imagery, to really get that engagement level, to really tap into interest and inquiry, because I don't want someone to just sit passively at a screen. I want to know what that person is thinking and feeling. And as you said, and I'm so impressed with that idea of proving oneself that they can do that step, and having a digital folio to demonstrate perhaps how you would teach a particular idea or a part of the curriculum, to show the panel just how you are in praxis. Because sometimes for interviews, you can present yourself in a way, or you can perhaps not present yourself because of nerves, but having a real good produced visual to demonstrate your skill through practice, and I would say would took me many years to really get comfortable, to really feel the room you're in. And that to me was a difficult skill that took me a while to learn, because to be able to feel the room of the people that are listening to you and think, oh, this isn't working, then that in itself is a skill, to think, okay, I'm going to stop this and I'm going to change it, and to admit to the class that in actual fact, that's what's happening. And, that's one of the things that I think with teaching that we do.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of, I don't know, originally, I've been making videos of myself teaching since 2016, with the original aim of sort of, I got sick of teaching the same thing over and over again, in the sense that the idea was, someone once told me that, like, you try not to be that teacher who does the same thing every year. And kind of video for me was a way that I could say, well, that would break the cycle. Like, so, if there's a very long PowerPoint we need to get through, we need to cover all of these content points. If I turn that PowerPoint into a video, then that to me would mean I'd never have to deliver it again. I could say to the students, it's up here, you can watch it whenever you want, at home, in class, wherever it is. And that would free me from the endless cycle of doing things that I've done before, repeated endlessly, ad nauseum, all those sort of things. But, like, whatever it is now, 5 years later, I try to get other teachers to do it, mostly because most of us never get to see ourselves teach, let alone talk, let alone anything. And there's hundreds of people I've met in, doing this kind of work, who would say, oh, I hate my own voice, or I can't, film myself because, my hair's messy, or I don't like the way I look, or when I speak into a camera, it's just not quite right. But I think there's something in there about candor and kind of refining your practice. So you could teach, generations before us, you could have taught for 80 years and never heard yourself teach, never seen yourself teach. And I think there's real value in even just voice recording yourself, deliver a lesson or to teach and listen to it back. And you start to realize, oh, okay, that's my go-to phrase, or I'm asking questions that, I already know the answer to, or all those sort of things, without necessarily requiring someone to come and observe your lesson or listen in or, watch you from a distance. You can sort of do a lot of those processes yourself. And the sooner you start reflecting and improving, I feel like the better things will be for you as a teacher and for your students as a result. And that's me.
And with your presentations, what is the one common error, I could say, or error to work on that when teachers take that task on of videotaping themselves?
Oh, geez, so many things. Because as you would know, like, because you say, okay, I want you to make a video, but then you bring in the research and you say, okay, well, it should be this length. And you should try to, use your hands and gesture, and you should have graphics as much as possible and make it synchronous and not redundant, and all these things that, cognitive load theory, multimedia cognitive load theory tell us. But to me, the biggest one is too many ideas and too long. So it's the classic talking for too long, being a lecturer who has 20 dot points in their head that they want to squish into one video rather than making 20 individual videos. It's just being precise. And to me, in teaching, you'd never stop and say, oh, I stuffed that up and start again. But that's something that's almost built in, especially in our kind of selfie generation. We know we want to put forward our best version of ourselves. So if you put a camera in front of a teacher and say, now explain that, they'll stop it, they'll start it, they'll say, let me redo that again, let me think of a different example. So length is the main problem. But I think invariably teachers start to self-correct if you ask them to do that sort of thing.
And what's your view of teacher voice versus student voice in a lesson, like in terms of the ratio? Do you kind of hold the same idea that John Hattie has put out, that there needs to be the spaces where it should be 85%? I think he's been quite a student voice and 20 to 25% teacher voice in a lesson.
Sounds insane to me, to be honest. But yeah, no, I don't know. To me, I would say you learn it, as a teacher when you're talking too much, and when the students are talking too much, and vice versa. I'd never put a ratio or a number on it. And I don't know, there does seem to be a widely held view that teachers talk too much. But it depends on your group and where they're at and their age and a whole range of different things. At the beginning of a topic, you're going to talk more. Towards the end, you'll be listening more. But, to say that each individual lesson as though it's a hermetically sealed kind of vacuum thing that happens without context is probably, I think, a bit, I don't know, silly from a research sense to think of, So there's a million contextual factors. I always like to get students talking and discussing, but to me, that's, you're not just sort of letting it run rampant. You sort of want to be, forming circles properly, getting students to collaborate in meaningful ways, reflecting on, the types of discussions they had. You want them to be preparing to be citizens in the world, once they leave school, not just kind of be empty vessels or sponges for the knowledge that you're putting out there. But that involves a lot of other stuff, not just content, talking or listening, but, all the other little things that we hopefully learn as we move out into the world.
Now, I was just thinking, Stephen, applying your skills that you do in your training workshops that you deliver, and I'm just assuming that even people who aren't teachers would probably benefit for some of the ideas about planning a lesson or planning to deliver a particular keynote. What do you see are, like, say, 2 or 3 key features when someone is presenting something, using technology as a tool? What would you say needs to be considered?
Oh, there's so many. Only 3?
Oh, I'm just saying, whatever. Because I think that, to me, sometimes it's sort of like everyone thinks PowerPoint, and it's interesting. Everyone says, oh, let's put a PowerPoint. But I think people somehow don't understand the concept. I want to hear from somebody who's passionate about IT, maybe challenge us on using the old PowerPoint.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of the tricky part is a lot of the stuff that I used to do, which we can't do anymore, is travel to Cambodia and teach teachers for like extended sessions. So it'd be like 5 or 6 hours in a day,
Oh.
and there's no power, so hence no PowerPoint. So
Ah.
I sort of learnt to teach adults, I guess, without anything. You know, you might be able to hand them a piece of paper and say, "Now read that while I take a breath and regather." Um, but yeah, and then so much, probably years later in my career, people said, "Oh, and we'd love you to speak at this conference." And I sort of went, "Oh, okay, speaking, sure, why not? I'll give it a crack." And then they're sort of saying, and it should go for an hour, and you'll need a PowerPoint, and everyone will sit in rows, and they'll listen to you for the hour, and then maybe they can ask you questions after, like as you leave, but not during, of course. And definitely don't really ask them to do anything. Just talk to them, and you kind of think it's counter to perceived logic, I guess, but it's basically just doing what good teaching involves. So sort of finding ways to involve the audience somehow. So it's kind of like we're trained in the opposite direction to just talk for too long, as I'm doing now, perhaps. And then you have to backtrack and work your way back and say, okay, well, how can I get people to actually engage with the ideas, give time to think, give time to engage, ask questions, lean on people, give people a smooth ride, whatever it is. Yeah, so I don't know. It's always building interaction, because planning an hour of topics is easy. Planning an hour of PowerPoint is easy, but actually building in interaction and asking people questions is a lot harder. I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about where you see teaching and technology in 5 years' time.
In 5 years' time, I would like to think it's improving. For me, the hard part, and this is sort of where our Venn diagrams of interests align, perhaps, but kind of the big part of technology use to me is because it's more inclusive, or it has the potential to be more inclusive.
Mm.
There's also not inclusive in a whole range of different ways that we could talk to later on, I guess. But the idea is that there's that potential. So if I say, a student with dyslexia, say, if I give them a video, they can slow it down, they can put captions on, they can do all sorts of things with that. But if I'm just standing in front of them talking and they lose focus, whatever it is, they struggle to process a key word, they get hung up on all sorts of things. That's ephemeral, that's gone, it's disappeared into the ether, never to be sort of brought back. So in 5 years, I would hope that would be the focus. And I know a lot of the big tech companies are trying to build that in. Like anything in tech, it's kind of without representation within the companies themselves. They often produce products that are a little bit, off center from what's required for the people with the things that the problems they're trying to solve, basically. But I think that's the biggest space for growth, sort of building in natively accessibility and those kind of inclusive features into technology. I know they're trying, and I'm hoping that there's a lot more sort of people helping them to improve iteratively, because, as I said, a lot of the sort of first attempts, we've solved a problem that we don't fully understand. Here it is, and then they give it to an end user who has those problems and says, well, the problems you're solving are not the problems I'm having. So I'd like to say in 5 years' time, teachers would be a lot more confident using technology, and that it would be a lot more inclusive of a whole range of different groups, so that they can actually get the most out of their education, which would help solve one of the biggest ongoing problems in education, which is that piece about inclusion and differentiation, I guess, as well.
And that's one of the things that I would hope, and I'm on the path to advocate, is to having students with additional learning needs perhaps participate in mainstream classroom settings. And one of the ideas that I'm trying to push is the use of, say, Zoom technology as a way to have that exposure for both cohorts of students to really learn from each other. And it could be a way to break down some of those barriers in terms of the separatist approaches to learning, of having all students in one school type, but also allowing to perhaps trialing it to see whether in terms of social skills, creative thinking, because if we are going to adopt as we know, that the curriculum and these deeper skills in creative thinking, teamwork, working with diverse communities, globalization, international realms, we really need to kind of explore difference, and also becomes difference in neurodiversity. And I would hope that one day we can bridge that technology, that somebody perhaps even with, I hate that word, profound disabilities diagnosis, can still be able to contribute to a team in some form, in some creativity sense, or whatever skill that they can bring to the group that will really shape new ways of learning and new knowledges that really do kind of allow the essence of human beings kind of more accepting each other. Because I guess I'd like to throw to you that your views on, can technology enable students with learning needs to be able to participate, do you believe, in the future employment and opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it was probably, I don't know, let me think, 2019, I think, I finished a diploma in, and this is in itself, to me, surprising. The degree was called Teaching Students with Autism Spectrum Disorder.
Oh, yes.
I've only just recently had a discussion on Twitter. We ran a discussion on ASD and all those sort of things, neurotypical, yada, 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 neurodiverse. And they were saying, well, the nomenclature has changed already. So for me to say I have a degree in teaching students with ASD sounds like I'm using the ASD to teach the students. And so we don't use that kind of language anymore already. Like, and this is only a couple of years old. So you can sort of see the language is changing. And look, as I'm a mainstream high school teacher, and I didn't, until I completed that degree, I didn't realize the sort of layers of not inclusion, I guess. And, you sort of have the sense, well, our high school is inclusive, as we feel all high schools are. But then you realize, oh, well, then there's an ASD school down the road, and that's specifically, for students with ASD. And then there's a special developmental school, and that's for students with an IQ of XYZ. And you start to realize just how sort of segregated our system is. And so, we'd be learning about a whole range of things. And then I'd sort of have to say, well, though a lot of the students that we're talking about don't exist in my school, and that's kind of society. I'm not saying it's, my school or any other school doing the wrong thing, but it's kind of like society has boxes that people go into. And so there's some students that just never appear in my school. And you might think, well, I have the skill set to work with them, but if they never arrive on my door due to a whole range of societal problems, then that in itself is kind of, not ideal, let's say. One of my big things is assistive technology, but again, that's like a very narrow range for the types of students that we have in my school. So that basically means the disabilities or the differences that we have are mostly around dyslexia, dyspraxia, not many physical disabilities. So a lot of it is like being neurodiverse, as you said. And so the range of assistive technologies that I have is very limited, but it's compared to most schools, perhaps, or most teachers, it's a lot broader than them. But if you go to a special school, they have a whole cornucopia of amazing tools and technologies that they use to support their learners that don't necessarily fit within the student cohort that I work with. But there's so much more that can be done across that barrier, especially because in special schools, they do something called video modeling. So if a student needs to learn a skill, they might film a point of view shot of the student doing up shoelaces, whatever it is, a simple skill, a complicated skill. I've even met teachers who would do that through a green screen. So they'd get the student, and they would green screen them doing the action so that the students could watch themselves doing the activity or doing the skill, whether they'd learned it yet or not. And that's the kind of stuff that's sort of like mind expanding for me, because that's that they call that video modeling. If you took that skill and brought that to a high school setting, we'd call it instructional video or flip learning or something else.
Mm.
So even like the research itself sort of segregates, well, that's theirs is called something else and ours is called something else. And so there's just such a big bridge or gap that needs to be bridged between the knowledge in different settings as a result of societal values and how they all manifest. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does. And it's really interesting because for me, and I was fortunate enough to work in a casual capacity, so I could work a couple of weeks in mainstream schools, a couple of weeks in a school specialising in work with students with autism, and I can't remember now. There's the other special developmental school. And for me as a teacher, it was the amount of skill that I acquired was phenomenal. I can't even say the word, because it was this. I learned so much from the students and the capacity to learn, and myself. It was so much reflective because you had to go in there with an open mind in terms of thinking about ways to engage and really thinking about the language that you use, how you use your words, how you use your body to navigate a concept, an idea. And it challenged me and I loved it. And I would hope one day there's the capacity for more teachers to really consider, that opportunity. If hopefully in the future that teachers could be able to go to one setting to a different setting to really experience that, how to deliver a lesson through a lens that's perhaps different from your everyday, so that you're challenging your own ideas, the schemas of your voice, your skills that you bring into teaching, so that you will become a better practitioner because you understand that diversity and how we learn, is shaped by our environments and shaped by that real important interaction between you and the student. It's a living symbiotic relationship that's forever changing. And I'm hoping everyone who's listening, who's considering teaching or even thinking about, do this, that, to really realize the skills you acquire in teaching are lifelong learning. And one thing I've learned too is that the importance of technology, picking up to date, looking at what's out there in apps and looking at ways it's also part of your own self-development. And I'm just thinking, Stephen, if people wanted to get involved in your the groups that you've set up, how can they reach out to you?
I don't know. I'm probably, if you Google me and exclude Steven Kolber, who has a very similar name and is much more famous than me, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. I mean, I've got my own website because I was excited to learn how to do that, more importantly than actually to have it. There's a website. I'm big on Twitter, so I'm sort of, that's where I run a lot of my groups, because that's where a lot of us teachers of a certain age are, let's say. Probably if I was younger and hipper or better looking, I'd be on Instagram, but sadly I'm old and decrepit, and so Twitter's where we hang out. So yeah, Twitter's probably the easiest place. LinkedIn, YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel called Mr. Kolber's Teaching, where there's hundreds of hours of me teaching students or adults or explaining the sort of stuff that I'm interested and excited by. I'm very available, perhaps too available, overexposed, you could say.
And I just want to say personally that I have enjoyed watching your videos for teaching, because it's improved my practice. Even though I'm out of the classroom at the moment, it's wonderful to watch and to even think to myself, my own modeling, looking at, I'll love that. I never thought of doing it that way. So I would really recommend to pre-service teachers, especially, or all teachers, to watch some of Steven's videos to sort of get reflection on yourself, because it's all about improvement, And the one thing I'm learning about teaching, because one is you're never too old to stop learning. And secondly, it's all about getting better. Every day we try something new. And that's the beauty of teaching, is that we become part of that journey of really learning forward with our young people. So we're kind of with them, and I love it. And I hope, Stephen, you come back again, because I really would love to also have another discussion about the idea about children, young people born in a digital age. With iPads that we see, the stories. How does that influence learning and teaching in a classroom when a young person is brought up with iPads from day one? And looking at, say, someone of my generation who's in their 50s, how does that work, and how do we need to change to really refine our practice so that we are able to impart that information with our students' learning journey? And before we go, I'd like to ask you just quickly, what message would you like to give to parents out there in COVID, with the possibility that we may not be back full term, for how to kind of work with your young people at home with schooling?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I guess it'd be basically just to be as reasonable as possible. I mean, we, as teachers and as in school systems, we're all sort of, except perhaps for the pointy end of school, year 12, we're trying as much as we can to sort of, live and let live, sort of let things be just as they are, rather than expecting students to be as their young brains are exploding in with hormones and all those sort of things, to expect them to sit and at a computer and get the same experience out of their schooling without their peers. Just be as sort of accommodating and reasonable as you can, and value family if you've got it with you in your home, rather than the academic achievement that may or may not be occurring as it should or could in face-to-face learning. So that's what I'd say. Just be reasonable, be willing to accept things as they are.
Well, thank you so much, Steven Kolber. It's been a wonderful experience speaking with you, and I hope you come back soon, because I think many people out there will love to hear more. We'll put a link to all your ways that people can get in contact, and hopefully inundate you with praise for your videos, and do likes and share them with other people as well, because if you are in a position in university that you are teaching pre-service teachers, I can only speak from my own experience. They're a great resource to really allow someone new to the teaching profession to listen actively and look at the cues and look at the way Steven uses language to engage students, and I think it will really refine your practice. So thank you so much, Steven, for being on our Voices today.
So yeah, appreciate it.